The pathetic Balkan fleet was nothing more than prey for the ruthless Threen warlords, easily ripped apart like a beast tears the flesh from a newborn Balkan larva. Murloc laid in his bunk on the cramped Balkan starship, one arm draped over his eye stalks, trying to block out the harsh reality. The war was going badly. Very badly. In just 3 years, the Threen had wiped out a dozen Balkan colonies, cracking open their birthing pools, shredding defenseless larvae with plasma fire, and melting Balkan cities into slag. Murloc's ship was part of the defense fleet, but they were outmatched in every way. The Threen ships were faster, larger, better armed and armored. There was no choice but retreat again and again, while Balkan civilians died in agony. Murloc's wingmate Kaval slumped into the bunk across from him, letting out a defeated sigh. Another colony lost. Millions dead. Kaval's eye stalks drooped. This can't go on. We'll be extinct in a decade at this rate. Murloc clenched his mandibles. He knew of only one slim hope for his species' survival, a hope the Balkan leadership thought insane and suicidal. The humans were right, Murloc clicked. They warned us about the Threen. They offered to help. Are you mad? Kaval hissed. The psychotic humans. You want to bring those genocidal killers here now when we're on the verge of collapse? They'll slit our thoraxes and drink our blood. Murloc's hearts raced as warning klaxons blared through the ship. The Threen had found them again. Here now with this puny fleet as the last line of defense for the Balkan homeworld. Murloc knew it was time for a terrible choice. Be destroyed by the Threen, or summon the only warriors psychotic enough to somehow help them win this war, the dreaded humans. Centuries ago, when humanity first ventured to the stars, they were filled with wide-eyed wonder at the possibilities that lay before them. The idea of joining a galactic community, of being recognized as an advanced civilization, was a dream come true. The human delegation stood proudly in the grand hall of the Galactic Assembly, their chests puffed out with pride as they presented their greatest technological achievements. They spoke of their mastery of fusion power, their sleek starships that could cross the vast distances between stars, and their advanced AI that could solve complex problems in the blink of an eye. But as the human ambassador finished his speech, the Dolan representative let out a derisive snort. The squat, three-eyed alien waddled up to the human delegation, his face twisted in a mocking sneer. You think your little toys impress us? The Dolan laughed, his voice dripping with contempt. We've seen 1,000 species like you, all convinced that they're special, because they can build a fancy ship or two. But let me tell you something, humans. The only thing that matters in this galaxy is resources, and from what we've seen, your little planet is positively dripping with them. The human delegation stood in stunned silence, their excitement visibly dimming as the Dolan's words sank in. But they refused to let this setback dampen their spirits. They would show the galaxy that they were more than just a source of resources to be exploited. And so the humans set about establishing trade agreements with various alien species, offering their advanced technology in exchange for the resources they needed to continue their exploration of the stars. They approached the Dolans, hoping to establish a mutually beneficial partnership. But the Dolans had other ideas. Within months, they had brazenly stolen millions of tons of resources from Earth, stripping entire regions bare without so much as a word of warning. When the humans objected, the Dolans simply laughed in their faces. Consider this a lesson, humans, the Dolan ambassador sneered. In this galaxy, you get payment up front or you get nothing at all. The humans were outraged, but they refused to let this setback define them. They would find other allies, other partners who would treat them with the respect they deserved. And so when the Sleen Empire extended an invitation for 100,000 humans to immigrate to their planet as honored guests, the humans leapt at the chance. They boarded the Sleen ships with high hopes, excited to start a new chapter in their galactic journey. But as soon as they arrived on the Sleen homeworld, the humans found themselves surrounded by armed guards. They were stripped of their belongings, forced into cramped, filthy barracks, and put to work in the Sleen's brutal labor camps. The humans were shocked and outraged. They demanded to speak with the Sleen leadership, to negotiate the release of their people, but the Sleen simply laughed in their faces. "You are our property now, humans," the Sleen Emperor declared, "and we will do with you as we please." The humans refused to accept this fate. They staged a daring escape attempt, fighting their way out of the labor camps and hijacking a Sleen transport ship. But as they made their way back to Earth, they were intercepted by a fleet of Sleen warships. The Sleen launched a barrage of 100,000 Viridium missiles at the human ship, each one targeted at a major population center back on Earth. The humans watched in horror as the missiles streaked towards their homeworld, knowing that they were powerless to stop them. The Viridium missiles detonated in the skies above Earth's cities, unleashing a terrible plague that left millions of humans writhing in agony. The Viridium burned through flesh and bone, leaving its victims as little more than charred husks. In the aftermath of the attack, the Jandis Collective approached the humans with an offer of aid. They claimed to have a cure for the Viridium plague, a medicine that could heal the wounds and restore the victims to health. The humans were desperate, and they eagerly accepted the Jandis offer. The Jandis doctors worked tirelessly to treat the Viridium victims, administering their miracle cure to all who needed it. At first the treatment seemed to work. The Viridium burns began to heal and the patients started to regain their strength. But then, just as the humans were beginning to hope that the worst was behind them, the patients began to die. It started with a few isolated cases, but soon the deaths were spreading like wildfire. The patients writhed in agony as the Jandis cure ravaged their bodies, liquefying their organs and leaving them as little more than sacks of bones and flesh. The humans were horrified when they realized the truth. The Jandis had never intended to cure the Viridium plague. Instead, they had used the humans as unwitting test subjects for a new bioweapon, a virus that was even more deadly than the Viridium itself. The humans were done playing nice. The Dolans had robbed them blind. The Sleen had enslaved them, and the Jandis had used them as lab rats. Earth went radio silent, cutting off all communications with the galactic community. The various alien races saw this as the humans, tucking their tails between their legs and hiding in shame. Across the galaxy, the story of the naive newcomers who got put in their place spread like wildfire. Late-night comedy shows roasted humanity's gullibility. Social media was flooded with mocking memes, and the phrase "dumb as a human" entered the lexicon. Even serious news anchors couldn't help but chuckle when reporting on the primitives who thought they could swim with the sharks. For 2 years, Earth was the butt of every joke. Then, without warning, humanity reopened communications to broadcast a single chilling message. "We welcomed you with open arms. Some of you laugh at us, and that is fine. But if you betrayed us, this is your only warning. Run." The transmission ended abruptly, plunging the galaxy into confused silence. Surely this was humanity's sad attempt at saving face. What could the primitives possibly do against the might of the galactic powers that had crushed them so easily? The prevailing opinion was that the humans were bluffing. They were not bluffing. Behind closed doors, the greatest human minds had been working tirelessly to backwards engineer the advanced alien technology used against them. Human ships were now equipped with bootleg Sleen weaponry and knockoff Jandis biotech. Fueled by rage and hungry for revenge, humanity was about to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of. The Sleen were the first to learn that the hard way. In a devastating surprise attack, human warships materialized in the skies of the 7 Sleen core worlds and unleashed a massive bombardment of enhanced Viridium missiles. The projectiles slammed into the planets, igniting their atmospheres in apocalyptic firestorms visible from orbit. Sleen cities became infernos as the very air itself burned. Millions of Sleen civilians were immolated instantly within a 1,000-mile radius of each impact site. Those who survived the initial blasts soon succumbed to the toxic fumes that choked the ravaged worlds. In mere hours, the crown jewels of the Sleen Empire had been reduced to lifeless husks. The galaxy was stunned by the attack, but most dismissed it as a fluke. The humans had gotten lucky, caught the Sleen with their guard down. It couldn't, happen again. The Jandis were confident in their impenetrable defenses. That confidence evaporated when the first Jandis started rotting alive. It began as small patches of necrotic flesh, but soon Jandis were watching in horror as their own body parts sloughed off down to the bone. Jandis doctors frantically searched for the cause of the nightmarish affliction. What they found shook them to their core. The humans had taken the Jandis bioweapon used on them and hybridized it with a human disease called leprosy. This mutant superplague ate its victims from the inside out with terrifying efficiency. Quarantines proved useless. Jandis space became a mausoleum as entire planets were consumed by the festering rot. Now it was the Dolan's turn to tremble. The species that had scoffed at humanity's pleas for mercy now prostrated themselves before Earth, begging for forgiveness. They apologized profusely for their theft, offering to pay back double what they took. They were still groveling when the human warships appeared in their skies. The Dolan homeworld, that shining metropolis that had stood for millennia, was reduced to molten slag in minutes. The once mighty Dolan military didn't even get a chance to fight back. Human beams and missiles tore through their hulls like tissue paper. In a final broadcast to the galaxy, the humans made their position clear. Human space was off limits. Any ship, no matter how peaceful its intentions, that approached would be destroyed without hesitation or warning. The line was drawn: stay away or die. The remaining galactic powers were enraged at the upstart humans' arrogance. Who were they to dictate terms to the older races? A grand alliance was formed, a massive armada assembled to put Earth back in its place. Thousands of ships, the pride of a dozen stellar empires, plunged into human territory to teach the savages a lesson. Not a single vessel returned. Long-range sensors registered flashes of weapons fire, then eerie silence. Probes sent to investigate found only clouds of drifting debris. The galaxy's mightiest fleet had simply vanished. For centuries to come, the zone of space around Earth was a no-man's land. Species that tested the humans' ultimatum swiftly learned it was no idle threat. Any ship, whether civilian freighter or military patrol, that strayed too close to the border had its engines disabled by some unknown technology. Moments later, it would be ripped apart by precision human strikes, leaving no survivors. The galaxy had created a monster that wanted to be left alone, forever. Murloc stared out the viewport of his bunk, eye stalks unfocused, his mind consumed by the dire straits his species found themselves in. The Threen were relentless, merciless, an unstoppable force that seemed hell-bent on wiping the Balkans from the face of the galaxy. And what were the other races doing while Murloc's people were slowly being exterminated? Nothing. Not a damn thing. Everyone else in this galaxy sits there and watches us die, slowly at the hands of the Threen, Murloc mused aloud, his voice tinged with equal parts despair and bitterness. They do nothing. We would all be better off if we were just left alone. His words trailed off as a sudden wild thought struck him like a plasma bolt. We would be better off if we were like the humans. Kaval, who had been fiddling with a malfunctioning datapad, snapped his eye stalks up to stare at Murloc incredulously. Have you lost your mind, Murloc? The humans are psychotic isolationists who shoot first and don't bother asking questions later. You want us to be like them. But Murloc barely heard his wingmate scoffing. The seed of an idea had been planted in his mind, and it was already taking root, growing into a desperate, dangerous plan. The next day, Murloc found himself in the cockpit of his one-man Vulcan fighter, his manipulator digits flying over the controls as he plotted a course that no one had dared attempt in centuries, a direct flight into human space. Kaval's mandibles had nearly hit the floor when Murloc told him of his intentions. This is suicide, Murloc. No one who goes into human territory comes back. No one. But Murloc's mind was made up. If the rest of the galaxy was content to let the Balkans be slaughtered, then perhaps it was time to turn to the one species that had told the galaxy to go screw itself. Weeks passed as Murloc's small ship hurtled through the void, the auto-assist keeping him on course while he rationed his dwindling food supplies. Just as he was starting to wonder if he had severely miscalculated the location of human space, his vessel suddenly went dead, the engines cutting out abruptly and leaving him drifting in eerie silence. Murlock's eye stalk swiveled to his instrument panel in alarm, but the readouts showed all systems operating normally. There was no mechanical reason for the ship to have lost power. A chill ran down Murlock's carapace as he realized what must have happened. This had to be the humans' doing, their infamous ability to disable any ship that approached their territory. Fumbling slightly in his haste, Murlock activated his ship's communicator and began broadcasting on all frequencies, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Please, if any humans are listening, my name is Murlock. I am a Balkan, and my people are being wiped out by the Threen. We need help, any help. I came here because I understand why you turned your backs on the galaxy after what was done to you. I don't blame you, but please don't let an entire species die because of the cruelty of a few." Murlock's pleas were met with nothing but silence, the unresponsive comm unit seeming to mock his desperation. Minutes dragged by with no answer, no indication that anyone had even heard his cries for aid. Something snapped inside Murlock, despair and frustration boiling over into white-hot anger. His manipulator digit closed around the grip of his sidearm, the weapon suddenly feeling very heavy on his hip. In one fluid motion, he drew the gun and fired point-blank at his own ship's disabled FTL drive. The drive exploded in a shower of sparks and shrapnel, the blast reverberating through the small craft. Murlock had just destroyed his only means of escape, stranding himself at the mercy of the humans. But he was beyond caring. If the humans wanted to kill him, they would have to do it face to face. He would not die a coward's death, alone and abandoned by an uncaring galaxy. Murlock raised the communicator to his mandibles again, his voice now shaking with rage and anguish. "Is this what you want?" he screamed into the uncaring void. "Do you want me to beg? To grovel? I won't do it. You hear me, humans. I won't. If you're going to kill me, then at least have the guts to do it to my face." Murlock waited, his heart's pounding, as the silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. His manipulator digits twitched, itching to reach for his sidearm, but he knew it would be futile. If the humans wanted him dead, he'd be a smoldering heap of carapace by now. Suddenly his ship lurched, the inertial dampeners struggling to compensate as an unseen force seized his craft. Murlock's eye stalk swiveled wildly, trying to make sense of what was happening. His vessel was being pulled, drawn inexorably towards something massive. As his ship was swallowed by the cavernous maw of a docking bay, Murlock felt his mandibles go slack. The human vessel was a behemoth, easily dwarfing the mightiest Balkan warships. Its hull seemed to stretch on forever, an endless expanse of armor and bristling weapon emplacements. The docking clamps had barely locked around his ship when the airlock hissed open. Armored human figures, their faces obscured behind opaque visors, stormed into his craft. Rough hands seized Murlock, hauling him out of his pilot's chair and dragging him down the umbilical corridor. Murlock found himself in a bare, dimly lit room, shoved unceremoniously into a chair bolted to the floor. The human guards took up positions by the door, their weapons trained on him. Then they waited. Hours crawled by. Murlock's eye stalks drooped with exhaustion, his throat dry and carapace itching. Still, the humans said nothing, did nothing. They might as well have been statues. Just as Murlock was starting to wonder if they meant to simply leave him here to rot, the door hissed open. A human officer strode in, his uniform crisp and medals gleaming on his chest. He loomed over Murlock, his eyes hard and unreadable. "Talk!" the officer barked. "Why are you here?" Murlock's mandibles worked soundlessly for a moment before he found his voice. The words spilled out of him, a desperate torrent. He spoke of the Threen's relentless advance, the worlds burned and populations slaughtered. He told of the Balkan fleets, outmatched and outgunned at every turn, forced to watch helplessly as their people were systematically exterminated. "Please," Murlock begged, his voice cracking. "We need help, any help. You of all species must understand the evil of a galaxy that sits back and watches genocide unfold." The human officer's expression didn't flicker. "The affairs of the galaxy are no longer our concern. Your war is not our war. Something snapped in Murloc. Rage, white-hot and all-consuming, surged through him. He lunged to his feet, ignoring the weapons instantly trained on him. "You hypocrites!" Murloc screamed. "You condemn the galaxy for its inaction, yet you do the same. You know the pain of betrayal, of watching your people suffer and die while others mock you. How are you any different from those who once wronged you?" The human guards were on him in an instant, armored gauntlets slamming him back into the chair. Murloc struggled, but their grip was implacable. The officer watched impassively, his face an unreadable mask. "Take him to a cell," the officer said flatly. "We're done here." The days blurred together as Murloc languished in his cell. The four metal walls seemed to close in on him, the silence broken only by the occasional clank of the meal tray being shoved through the slot in the door. Murloc picked at the unfamiliar food, his appetite gone. At first he raged, pounding on the door and shouting until his throat was raw. Then he pleaded, bargaining and cajoling with the impassive guards. Finally, he simply sat, staring at the walls, hope draining away like blood from a wound. He had failed. The humans would not help. His desperate gambit had been for nothing. The Balkans would fall, and he would spend his last days rotting in this cell, forgotten and unmourned. Murloc was roused from his bitter reverie by the sound of the cell door opening. He looked up listlessly, expecting to see the usual guard with his meal. Instead, he found himself hauled to his feet and marched down the corridor. The room he was brought to was large and dimly lit, a far cry from the bare interrogation chamber. A massive viewport dominated one wall, showing a star field streaked with the blue of FTL travel. And there, silhouetted against the stars, stood a figure Murloc recognized from the intel briefings, the captain of the human ship. The captain turned, his eyes finding Murloc's. For a long moment he simply stared, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "Your words have caused quite a stir among my crew," the captain said. "Many of them have been watching the Threens advance and debating the wisdom of our non-intervention policy." Murloc said nothing, hardly daring to breathe. "We've made a decision," the captain continued. "A volunteer task force will be dispatched to aid the Balkan war effort. I will lead it myself." Murloc felt his knees go weak. "You mean—" "We're going to help you fight the Threen," the captain said. "It's time for humanity to remember that evil triumphs when good species do nothing." The journey to Balkan space passed in a blur. Murloc stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching in awe as the fleet assembled. These were warships unlike any the galaxy had seen, bristling with weapons that made the Threen armada look like children's toys. The Threen never stood a chance. The human fleet tore through their ships like a plasma lance through paper, their advanced weaponry turning the Threen's own technology against them. Murloc watched, his heart soaring, as the invaders were driven back, their once unstoppable advance shattered. In the aftermath, as the last of the Threen ships fled, the humans and Balkans came together. There were no grand ceremonies, no flowery speeches, just a simple understanding, a mutual respect forged in the crucible of war. The humans made it clear that this was not a prelude to rejoining the galactic community. They had intervened because it was right, not because they sought to reclaim their place among the stars. That chapter of their history remained closed. As Murloc watched the human fleet prepare to depart, the captain stood at his side. "Tell me," the captain said, "what will you do now?" Murloc considered the question. "I'll return to my people," he said, "help them rebuild and ensure that the galaxy never forgets the lesson we learned today." The captain nodded. "And what lesson is that?" Murloc's eye stalks met the captain's gaze. "That strength comes in many forms, and that even the most resolute species can be driven to action if pushed too far." With that, the humans departed, their ships vanishing into the void. Murloc watched them go, a strange mix of emotions churning in his gut, gratitude, respect, and a lingering sense of awe. For he had seen firsthand the folly of underestimating the depths of the human spirit, and he knew that the galaxy would never make that mistake again. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that's